I told my autistic brother the truth when he asked me why women don't like him. My brother Jake has always been different. He's got autism, and he's never really understood social cues the way most people do. Growing up, I watched him struggle with friendships, and especially with girls. He'd do things like stand too close when talking, or launch into these super detailed explanations about trains, or whatever he was obsessed with that week without reading the room. By the time he hit college, Jake was getting really frustrated. He'd see other guys getting girlfriends and going on dates, and he couldn't figure out what he was doing wrong. He started asking me about it constantly. Why don't girls want to hang out with me? Why do they always make excuses when I ask them out? What am I missing? For months, I gave him the usual stuff, just be yourself. The right person will come along. You're a great guy. But honestly, I was lying. Because the truth was, Jake did have some habits that made dating really hard for him. He'd interrupt people mid-sentence to correct them about random facts. He'd show up to days wearing the same wrinkled shirt he'd been wearing for 3 days. He had this nervous laugh that he'd do at completely wrong times, like when someone was being serious. The breaking point came when Jake told me about this girl Emma from his computer science class. He'd been trying to ask her out for weeks, and she kept saying she was busy. Jake was convinced she was just playing hard to get. He had this whole plan to surprise her at her dorm with flowers and ask her to be his girlfriend. I knew this was going to be a disaster. Emma had been polite but clearly wasn't interested, and showing up at her dorm uninvited was going to freak her out. But Jake was so excited about his plan. He bought these expensive roses and everything. That night, he came back to our apartment completely crushed. Apparently, Emma had answered the door, taken one look at him and the flowers, and told him straight up that she wasn't interested and that he needed to stop following her around campus. Her roommate had even come to the door and told Jake to leave or they'd call security. Jake was sitting on our couch just staring at the wall. He looked at me and said, "I don't get it. What is wrong with me? Why doesn't anyone want me?" I'd been having this internal debate for months about whether to be honest with him. Part of me thought it would be cruel, but seeing him so defeated, I realized that tiptoeing around the truth wasn't helping him at all. It was actually making things worse because he kept making the same mistakes over and over. So, I sat down next to him and said, "Jake, do you really want to know? Because I can tell you, but it might be hard to hear." He nodded. So, I took a deep breath and laid it all out. I told him that showing up at someone's dorm uninvited with flowers, after they already said no multiple times, wasn't romantic, it was scary. I explained that when someone says they're busy 3 times in a row, they're usually trying to let you down easy. I told him that interrupting people constantly and correcting them made conversations feel exhausting instead of fun. I also mentioned the hygiene stuff, how he'd wear the same clothes for days, how his breath was usually pretty bad because he forgot to brush his teeth, how he picked at his skin during conversations. I explained that first impressions matter and that taking care of yourself shows respect for the other person. The hardest part was explaining the social stuff, how his nervous laugh made people uncomfortable because it came at weird times, how launching into 20-minute explanations about programming languages on a first date wasn't building connection, and how standing too close made people feel trapped instead of interested. Jake was quiet for a long time after I finished. I was worried I'd been too harsh, but then he said, "Why didn't anyone tell me this before?" I explained that most people don't want to hurt someone's feelings, so they make polite excuses instead of being direct. But that had left him confused and frustrated because he couldn't figure out what was going on. This version includes proper punctuation for clarity and readability. If you want tips on communicating such sensitive topics or support resources, feel free to ask. Storytime. My boss fired me after 18 years and said, "We need fresh blood." The next month, he walked into a meeting and froze when the board introduced their new investor, me. Chapter 1. The performance review. That wasn't. I had been with the company for 18 years. Not 18 months. Not 5 years. 18. I'd started as a floor technician back when the company had 20 employees and an espresso machine. The tea spit out more steam than coffee. I worked late, learned fast, said yes to everything. Promotions came slow, but they came. Project manager, then senior ops, then department head. People came and went, but I stayed because I believed in the company. I believed in him. My boss, Douglas, the man who once shook my hand after I landed our biggest distribution deal and said, "You're the kind of guy I want beside me when things get tough." But as the company grew, Douglas changed. The old jokes stopped. The warm chats turned into cold memos. And suddenly, the tough he talked about was me. I was called into a conference room on a Thursday. No notice, no agenda, just Douglas, an HR rep, and a folder. He didn't look at me. 18 years is a long time, he said, flipping open the folder like he was reading from a script. But the board and I believe the company needs fresh blood, New ideas, a new generation. I blinked. Douglas, I'm leading the entire logistics integration. We're onboarding a new client and it's not personal. He cut in. It always is. The HR rep slid a pre-written severance package across the table. No, thank you, no handshake, just out. As I walked to my car, box of memories in hand, I passed the espresso machine. Still steaming like always, still loyal, unlike them. I sat behind the wheel and whispered one thing. You want fresh blood? Let's see how you handle a transfusion. Chapter 2, The Meeting in Palo Alto. 2 weeks after I was fired, I found myself sitting in a quiet glass room overlooking the Palo Alto skyline. The chairs were leather. The espresso machine hissed like a whispering secret, and across from me sat Jordan Lin, the CFO of a tech investment group that made headlines just last quarter for flipping a logistics software firm and tripling their money. He was 35, sharp suit, sharper instincts. You said you used to run the supply chain for Grayson and Company, he said, scrolling through my resume. I nodded. For 18 years, he looked up. And they fired you? Because I wasn't fresh blood? I said, smiling flatly. He leaned back, tapping his pen on the table. That's interesting. Because we just acquired 12% of Grayson and Company stock last week. Quiet move. Board hasn't announced it yet. We're looking to raise that to 18%, possibly 21%. That number made my breath catch. 1% was influence. Board seat level. What if I could tell you everything about their back-end operations? I said, steadying my voice. Their vendor weaknesses, their personnel issues. How they're bleeding profit with their legacy software. Jordan stopped tapping. You know that much? I reached into my briefcase and slid over a slim black folder inside diagrams, analytics, vendor contract audits I'd saved to my personal cloud before they walked me out. I don't want revenge, I said, locking eyes with him. I want to help you build something better. And when the moment comes, I want to be in the room. Jordan smiled, not with amusement, but with calculation. I think we can arrange that. He stood and shook my hand. For the first time in 2 weeks, I felt something warm crawl back into my chest. Not anger, control. And I wasn't letting it go. Chapter 3, The Boardroom Shift. 3 weeks later, I walked into the same building where I'd given 18 years of my life. Same marble lobby, same receptionist who once waved cheerfully at me, now awkwardly looking away. But this time, I wasn't carrying a badge. I was carrying equity. The boardroom on the 42nd floor looked exactly the same. Long mahogany table, 12 black chairs, and a view of the skyline that screamed legacy. At the head sat Richard Graves, my former boss, the man who fired me without looking up from his phone. He didn't see me at first. He was too busy laughing with one of the other executives until Jordan Lin, the CFO from Palo Alto, walked in behind me and said, "We're ready." Richard looked up and froze. His smile flattened like air escaping a tire. "What is he doing here?" he asked sharply. Jordan didn't blink. "Meet our newest strategic advisor, and as of this morning, the controlling partner of our latest acquisition round." Richard blinked. "That round was anonymous." "It was," I said calmly, placing a thick folder on the table. The board members murmured. Richard stood half chuckling. "This is some kind of stunt. You can't just." Jordan cut him off. "But the combined shares now transferred. Our voting bloc has controlling interest. Effective immediately. We are proposing a restructuring of operations, including leadership." Review silence. One board member, an older woman I remembered from quarterly calls, turned to me. "Mr. Becker, what would you do differently?" I opened the folder, charts, numbers, missed opportunities. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I just showed them what Richard had ignored for 5 years. By the end of the meeting, the vote was unanimous. Richard was transitioned into early retirement with no ceremony. No farewell, just a man in a corner office packing his own things in a cardboard box. When I passed him on the way out, he muttered, "This company was mine." I smiled. "You said you wanted fresh blood." Chapter 4, The Gala Invite. 2 months after the boardroom shift, we hosted a gala at the Grand Crest Hotel downtown, the same venue Richard used to brag about reserving for the company's executive dinners. This one was different. It wasn't just a party. It was a rebranding event, a celebration of our new direction, new leadership, and the biggest acquisition the firm had ever pulled off. A silent statement without saying a word. I stood near the tall glass windows watching guests arrive in glittering gowns and tuxedos. Industry leaders, media representatives, former competitors. I didn't need to walk the floor. I didn't need to make speeches. But I made sure the guest list included one very specific name. Richard Graves. He arrived late, hesitant, no longer in a tailored brony suit, just an off-rack tux with shoulders too wide. He scanned the room, unsure of where to stand. No one greeted him. No one offered him champagne. He spotted me across the room and froze. Then his eyes drifted to the massive screen above the stage. The new company motto faded into view in bold white letters, built by those who were told to leave. The room burst into applause. Cameras flashed. One by one, the board members took the stage behind me. All the same ones who voted him out. Richard backed into the shadows. That was the night I gave my only speech. I kept it short. Some of us weren't born with power. We were given walls, doors, ceilings, and told to stay under them. But we learned to build quietly, and eventually we bought the whole building. Silence fell like a curtain. When I stepped off stage, Richard was already gone. Final chapter. What happened after? In the months that followed, I didn't see Richard again. He never returned to the firm, never reached out. Word quietly spread that he had tried to join a competitor, but they passed. Something about poor leadership judgment after firing a key veteran. Weeks before a billion-dollar shift, I didn't gloat. I didn't speak his name. That was never the point. The point was this. I no longer needed a seat at someone else's table. I owned the table now, and more importantly, I decided who sat at it. The company thrived. We restructured with empathy, promoted from within, and launched a mentorship program for employees over 40 who feared being replaced just for aging. It became personal. One day, a young analyst stopped me in the hallway. He looked nervous. "Sir," he said, "you don't know this, but when you got fired last year, I almost quit. I thought if even you weren't safe, what chance did the rest of us have?" He paused. "But now I stay because I believe in this place, because you came back, because you turned it into something better." I didn't say much, just smiled and nodded. But inside, something settled. It wasn't just revenge. It was rebuilding something that couldn't be taken from me again. Not power, respect. Epilogue: the elevator that skipped his floor. Months later, I was walking through the building on a quiet Thursday morning when I heard the familiar ding of the executive elevator. A man in a rumpled blazer stepped in behind me. Gray at the temples, leather briefcase, nervous fingers adjusting his collar. It was Richard. We made brief eye contact, just a flicker. He reached for the panel. I didn't speak, just calmly pressed the button for the top floor, the boardroom suite. He hesitated, then pressed for the 6th floor where HR used to keep the contractor cubicles. The elevator hummed as we ascended. At floor 6, the doors opened. He didn't move. His eyes glanced up toward the golden nameplate I now wore on my chest, toward the floor he once ruled from. But I said nothing. He slowly stepped out alone, quiet, no one waiting to greet him. As the doors closed between us, I looked down at the panel. The button for the executive floor glowed softly. And then the elevator skipped his floor entirely, just like the company had, just like life had. And as I rose in silence, I realized something simple and powerful. He fired me to erase me, but he only made room for who I was becoming. Was this revenge perfectly justified, or should the storm have raged harder? Drop your verdict below. I read every single one. If you are watching this video, comment below and tell us where you are watching this video from. Hit like if you crave justice and share the story with someone who needs its fire. Subscribe to Revenge Exposed, because here betrayals don't sleep. They hunt their owners. Every shadow hides a reckoning, every mask breaks, and every betrayal is answered. Stay sharp. Stay unbroken.